Assemblywoman Malliotakis.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. I just had a few brief comment and then a question as well. I just want to echo what my colleague said about the manufacturer break for upstate. I represent New York City, and I join my colleagues in saying that we believe those within the MTA territory should also receive the benefit as well. I don't think it's fair to have a certain break for manufacturers upstate and not do the same thing for everyone in the state of New York. So if you could please make those recommendations when you go back and meet with the governor, that would be great. I also want to just ask a question, if you could just explain for everyone, regarding property taxes and how the governor's proposal can possibly affect New York City. I know that he has proposed that they be included in the circuit breaker. Can you just explain exactly how and under what terms New York City could get a tax cap or qualify for the circuit breaker?
Well, the circuit breaker proposal really focuses on providing real property relief for homeowners across the board, and as you know, looks at income as the principal determination of whether relief is appropriate. So much as was the case with STAR registration, the focus on homeowners is statewide, with respect to providing that relief, I think it would be fair to say that given the fact that, as the governor pointed out in the State of the State and elsewhere, that real property-related taxes are the single largest burden on New Yorkers. In fact, it exceeds the income tax. It's an important area to provide relief.
Well, I understand, we both know that New York City controls its own fate when it comes to property taxes. But can you explain, as a New York City legislator who is in the legislature, I would like to just be able to make those arguments when we go back home to our city government. So what can we say they need to be done to ensure that New York City is included in the circuit breaker?
Well, the proposals don't change New York's jurisdiction over its property taxes. So New York City will continue to have the ability to set its own policy, as it does now, with respect to assessment methodology, frequency of reassessment. That's not going to change.
But in terms of the circuit breaker?
In terms of the circuit breaker, it still wouldn't change. I mean, that the city will be able to control its policies with respect to property taxes.
Okay. I'm just going to move on to one last thing, and that is a report that came out, a couple of reports last month, or actually it was a couple of weeks ago, talking about Superstorm Sandy and how the sales tax revenue as it relates to people having to make replacements or buying materials, replacing vehicles for Superstorm Sandy, has brought in a windfall of about 5.2% for 2013 here in the state. Are there any plans, well, first of all, do you have a breakdown of that revenue, of exactly perhaps what counties contributed? Well, you would have the breakdown per county, but maybe, is there any plan by the governor? And we have proposed this locally, and we have tremendous bipartisan support also from senators, assembly members. Many of us that are up here today have joined together in calling for the revenue that was generated for sales tax for especially those victims who had to replace their vehicles. The sales tax really is a windfall, and the state shouldn't be making money off of that. Is there any plan, or have there been any discussions about possibly returning those funds to the victims?
Well, we would certainly be happy to share with you and the committees the monthly sales reports that the department publishes. In fact, several of them are available on our website. There's no question that there has been an uptick in sales tax receipts from motor vehicles. There have been for certain categories of food provision, as well as retailing generally. So I think the first point is that the uptick that we've seen in the collection of sales tax is broader than just what was related to economic activity that could be directly attributable to Sandy.
Okay, so I'm going to ask again if the governor or anyone on the team has discussed any possibility of perhaps returning the windfall for those Sandy victims who have had to replace vehicles due to the superstorm, there was no choice. They would not be purchasing a vehicle otherwise, so it's not, you can't really count this as regular revenue coming into the state. This is windfall money. Have there been any discussions, because the legislature, many members have been proposing it, have had press conferences, have been talking about it. It was even put forth in, I think, the budget resolutions last year. Have there been any discussion about returning the money that the state has made as a windfall for these replacement vehicles to the Sandy victims?
Perhaps you could help me in terms of defining windfall. What is the definition of windfall?
Well, what I would say is, when the storm hit, we had many victims who lost their vehicles. They had to replace those vehicles and had to pay sales tax as a result. That is not money that the state was anticipating. It really is a windfall in the budget. And these people were forced to purchase these vehicles as a replacement by an act of God. And so my question is, we've been pushing to try to reimburse them for that. Even the DMV has not even been able to waive the registration fee for these people who have suffered so much and are just simply trying to replace their vehicles. So we would like to see that perhaps being pushed from your end as well, if we can get some support on that.
Well, the short answer to your question would be no, but we, as I tried to indicate, if you take a look, if you break down the sales tax receipts across all of the counties, across a multi-year period, the uptick in receipts that you will see is broader than just activity that you can directly attribute to Superstorm Sandy.
Sure.
So that's why I asked you for the definition, because it would be very difficult, I think, to argue that of the 5+% increase, that you essentially can say that even the majority of it was directly related. But we would be happy to work with your office to provide some analytics around that.
I would appreciate that. Sure. I would love to get those numbers and try to work that with you. Thank you.